seats down here in the front and seats in the middle, so feel free to, you're not going to interrupt me while I'm doing introductions, that's fine. Make yourselves at home. Our keynote speaker, Will Allen, is an urban farmer who has transformed the planning, cultivation, production, and delivery of good, healthy food to urban and rural populations. As the son of a southern sharecropper and former professional basketball player, ex-corporate sales leader, and longtime farmer, he is recognized as a national and international leader in urban and rural agriculture and food policy. After a career in professional basketball and a number of years in corporate sales and marketing at Procter & Gamble, in 1993, Allen returned to his roots and purchased the last remaining registered farm in the city of Milwaukee, where he operates Will's Roadside Farms and Markets. As the founder of the nonprofit Growing Power, Allen was a leader in the sustainable urban farming movement and has had a lasting impact on communities across the country. In 2008, Allen was named a John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation Fellow and Genius Grant Award winner. In 2010, Time magazine named Allen to its list of 100 world's most influential people. A member of the Clinton Global Initiative, he was invited to the White House to join First Lady Michelle Obama in launching the Let's Move campaign, her signature leadership program to reverse the epidemic of childhood obesity in America. In 2010, Allen received the key to the city of Milwaukee. In 2011, Allen received the James Beard Award. Allen also attended the Milan Expo 2015 in Italy, where our actual president is right now, as part of the U.S. presidential delegation led by First Lady Michelle Obama. Allen's book, The Good Food Revolution, Growing Healthy Food, People, and Communities, was published in 2012 and received the Silver Medalist Award from Axiom Business Books. The book was nominated for Outstanding Literary Work for an NAACP and for an NAACP Image Award in 2013. The Good Food Revolution is being used as a college textbook across the nation, including here at Ripon College, where his work is taught in several classes. So I welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Will Allen.
Everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There is so much hatred, war and poverty. Oh yeah, yeah.
Wake up all the teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. 'Cause they're the ones who's coming up and the world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the very best you can. Oh yeah.
The world won't get no better if we just let it be.
Oh no.
The world won't get no better. We gotta change again, just you and me. Wake up all the doctors, make the old people well. They're the ones who suffer and who catch all the hell. They don't have so very long before their judgment day. So won't you make them happy before they pass away? Oh yeah.
Wake up all the builders, time to build a new land. I know we can do it if we all lend a hand. The only thing we have to do is put it in our minds. Surely things will work out, 'cause they do every time.
wake up just for the breath of life. I thank my maker. My mom say I come from hustlers and shakers. My mind building on skyscrapers and acres. He said take us back to where we belong. I try to write a song as sweet as the Psalms. Though I'm the type to bear arms and wear my heart on my sleeve. Even when I fail in God, I believe. Read the days and weave through the maze, and the seasons so amazing. Feed them and raise them. Seasons are aging. Earthquakes, wars and rumors. I want us to get by, but we more than consumers. We more than shooters, more than looters. Created in His image, so God lived through us. And even in this generation, living through computers, only love can reboot us. Come on.
Wake up, everybody, no more sleeping in bed. Oh, wake up, everybody, yeah. Said I need a little help, I can't do it alone. Oh, I need a little help, come on. I need a little help, y'all. Can't do it alone. Oh, I need a little help, y'all. Can't do it alone.
Wake up, everybody. Wake up, everybody. Wake up, everybody. Yeah.
Hang on to the world as it spins around. Just don't let the spin get you down. Things are moving fast. Hold on tight and you will last. Keep your self-respect, your manly pride. Get yourself in gear, keep your stride. Never mind your fears. Brighter days will soon be here. Take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Yeah.
All that is solid melts into air. All that is sacred is profane. And man is compelled to face with sober senses his conditions of life and his relations from this kind.
Thank you. One of the things I need is a clicker for the slides.
So I want to start with a riddle. What did President Obama and the House...
Okay. Good afternoon. It's great to be here. Actually, this time yesterday I was in Spokane, Washington. So I flew all night to get here, and it's just great to be back home, after a long trip. One of the things I want to talk a little bit about today, and I really enjoyed the student presentations. They were all great. And thank you. Some of the things that you talked about really hit on a lot of things that I've been doing my entire farming career, which spans over 60 years now. So it was really good to see that you students are so engaged and wanting to change the dynamics of our communities, not only rural communities, but urban communities as well. As you could see on that presentation, our urban communities are hurting as well. So, you know, one of the organizations that I started was called Farm City Link. It was about linking urban with rural, because both communities need each other in terms of being able to help each other. And we're in a terrible situation today, not only in the state of Wisconsin, but around the country and around the world when it comes to our food system, because our food system is broken. Just to give you an example of what happened last year here in our state, we lost 780 farms in the state of Wisconsin. At that rate, we won't have very many farms left. Those farms and that farmland, of course, is going to larger scale operations that aren't very sustainable, and we have to reverse that. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is a new crop that's come into our state in the last 2 years. That was an old crop back in the day, which is hemp. In 2018, there were 400 producers that applied for industrial hemp license. This year was 2,100. And I believe that that crop could be a part of a sustainable piece that can help farmers and keep farmers in business, because as a cash crop, it's much better to grow hemp than soybeans and corn and using Roundup, because most of the corn and soybeans in this state, we use Roundup to grow them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the presentation, but I want to take you through a little bit of the history of some of the work that I've done over the years. And maybe you might get some ideas in terms of some of your projects that you might want to do in this community, because the stuff you'll see is not only for urban communities, but rural communities as well. Back in 1993, these young people right here that are writing stuff down had really, really bad grades. And one of the things that changed the dynamics of these young people was the fact that they started doing hands-on education. And I think that's where we really missed the boat, because we used to do that a long time ago, where students used to do more with their hands and learning, and then it triggered them to want to learn more and get in the classroom and dig deeper and want to read about things. So that's what we did with these young people. We'd have them do something in a physical way on the farm, and then we'd bring them in and they would write about what they had just experienced. And their grades improved. So that's something that we're doing really all over the country, and something I talk about all the time. And then more and more young people started coming around at our facility on Silver Spring Drive, which was built in the late 1920s. It's the oldest farm operation in the city of Milwaukee, the last remaining farm in the real farm, registered farm in the city of Milwaukee. And that's what it looks like. And this is another farm that I operate. This is in Oak Creek, where I live, which is right outside of Milwaukee. And we do hoop house construction and hoop house growing. And the main reason for that is because of climate change. To make sure that we can grow a crop throughout the winter, throughout the year, 4 seasons, using some sustainable methods. And of course, one of the things that I wanted to bring into play was renewable energy, to be able to have solar panels, to be able to produce some of our energy. About a quarter of our energy is derived from these solar panels. And as time went by, you can see the location. We're in the neighborhood, a very densely populated neighborhood, the largest public housing project in the area. 30,000 visitors a year came to the farm on tours, workshops, classes, a lot of students from the schools. It didn't matter what time of the year it was, whether it was wintertime or whatever, people would come. even folks like this from one of our more popular companies. And one of the things that we did was not only just talk about things, but have workshops so people could learn the skills like how to do mushroom cultivation, to be able to do these chandeliers with oyster mushrooms that are absolutely delicious, that take about 3 weeks to actually grow these mushrooms. And of course, the most important thing, and I'm sure there are some folks in this room that come from farm families and they know that it's all about the soil. When you're engaged in agriculture, the soil, 90% of our soil in this country lacks the essential minerals that we need for us to be healthy when we eat food. A lot of the food we're eating does not have the minerals that's necessary to keep us healthy. So that's really important to be able to grow soil from the waste. About 40% of our food that that is cooked is not eaten. So that should go back into Mother Earth. So this is what we do. This is one of my favorite things to do. It starts with the soil. To be able to take that waste and turn it back into soil. And to do that, you have to build relationships. This is very important, to be able to build relationships with companies that have the waste, like Collectivo. They used to be called Altera in Milwaukee. And of course, we have a lot of breweries. So using brewery waste, which is about 18% nitrogen to put into the recipe, is really an important thing. We have a lot of microbreweries, like Lakefront Brewery, which is a pretty large microbrewery we have in Milwaukee. And of course, wood chip. Every time there's a storm, we don't like storms because things get destroyed, but there's always a plus with a storm. We always have trees coming down, and that wood chip is something that we can also use in our recipe. And the fruits and vegetables that are collected from grocery stores and food processors, to be able to use that in growing the soil. But you need hundreds and thousands of pounds of compost. So this is the end result. It takes about 4 months to be able to grow that soil. When you actively turn it, about 8 months when you do it in a static state. So that's something that we really have spent a lot of time over the years doing, growing a lot of soil to be able to do. We also have vermicomposting, worms. We need worms. Worms are very important in soil when you're doing sustainable agriculture. Now these are red worms. There are about 7 different varieties of red worms that we have. We started out about 25 years ago with about 30 pounds of worms. We have 7,000 pounds of worms to break down our compost into worm castings. So worms are our friends. I look at worms as livestock. You know, a lot of people look at a worm and they'll see them on the sidewalk and they'll step on them, but these worms live to be over 20 years old. So I look at them as livestock. And of course, working with youth in the community is where we really have to put a lot more emphasis. When you put a couple hundred worms in a child's hands, they first jump back and then they embrace it and then they're all good with nature. So it's really important to introduce kids to that. And of course, we want to recover our worms because they are our livestock. So we use a screening method. And then we are able to sell the vermicompost, and this is my daughter, who's also a farmer and an artist, came up with this. Now, worms are the same sex, but she came up with this thing. And then we sift out the heavy stuff in the worm casting. So 8 months ago, that was food waste and carbon waste, and now it's the highest quality organic fertilizer, arguably in the world. And then you can turn that into compost tea, which can be used to fertilize, just like a chemical fertilizer, only it's organic. It's an either-or product, and it also acts as a pesticide. as it covers the leaves and insects. And of course, with that compost, we build beds on top of asphalt and concrete. Most of our cities are 80% asphalt and concrete. So why not turn it back into soil, into a carbon sequestration place where carbon can go back, because carbon is not sequestered in concrete or asphalt. So we can take any concrete and asphalt and turn it into beds like this. 36 inches wide, 24 inches high, and you can grow almost anything. And of course, aquaculture is a big thing. Right now, China controls about 3/4 of the fish production in the world. The U.S. has lost almost all of its fish production. We have a tiny slice. So we need to get back into the game. And many of our rivers and streams are toxic, and we're eating toxic fish. When we go out on Lake Michigan, personally, I would never eat anything out of Lake Michigan because of the mercury in the fish and other toxins in the fish. The only way to get away from mercury is to grow inside. So one of the things I started to do, I built this aquaponics system that operates with just one pump. It's a recirculating system. It's a water conservation system. The same water gets recirculated, and you're able to grow one of our favorite fish, which is yellowtail lake perch that we find in our fish fries. I'm sure many of you, some of you are from outside of the Wisconsin, but Wisconsin is noted for its fish fries. And right now it's very difficult to get lake perch unless they're grown this way. So to be able to, these are two 10,000-gallon aquaponic systems. It's a symbiotic relationship between the plants and the fish. The plants take the toxins, the nitrites, out of the water so the fish can survive. And there's no mercury in those fish because they're inside. We cut our teeth growing tilapia, and then we switched over, working with the School of Freshwater Science, to lake perch. That's what they look like, yellowtail lake perch. And that's a black pacu. That's a South American fish that we're doing some research on. It gets up to 50 pounds. Chefs like it. It only eats vegetarian. It's a vegetarian. It only eats vegetables, nuts, and berries. So the meat is very good. It's a very tasty fish. And those are fillets that you see before they go into a fish fry. So we're able to grow those fish, have these fillets. Now what you're about to see is a project that I've been working on for the last 10 years with the School of Freshwater Science and breeding fish, because we're, all the Great Lakes, there's a moratorium on fishing for a lake perch because the numbers are just not there anymore. So commercially you can't go and fish, but you can go out there and try with your own boat or whatever. So what we're doing here at the Great Lakes Institute, those are called broodstock. Those are fish that are about 4 years old. They're at a breeding state. And what Dr. Binkowski is going to show us is how to produce those fingerlings. We need millions and millions of fingerlings to be able to have our farmers be able to grow these fish. So this is at the Institute, and that's a female fish. It has a bloated belly. The egg strand that's going to come out of there is over a yard long, about 40,000 offspring. So what Fred is doing, he's going to squeeze this egg strand out. And he has to keep it intact. If it's broken, it's no good and the fish won't survive. So the real key to this whole thing is you have to know the difference between a male and a female fish for this to work. If you don't know that, then it doesn't work. So he's going to reach it back in the tank, and we've taken those fish from 40 degrees up to 60 degrees, and they're swimming very slowly. and he'll reach in and grab a male fish, and he'll squeeze the sperm out of the male fish into the egg strand, and now they're fertilized. Well, not quite. You have to have a stainless bowl, and I know some of you students don't know how to cook, because I heard somebody talk about we need to teach people how to cook. What group was that? Yeah, that's right on. What you guys said, that's right on. So we hand stir that, and now they're fertilized, and we get, so I'm the only person he's ever trained to do this, and it's really fun. So if you guys come in the spring, I'll teach you how to do it. So those are the egg strands. We pin them on a grate elevated by milk cartons in a 1,000-gallon tank. So each one of these tanks, about 400,000 offspring, potential offspring. So a couple years ago, we did some research with the Institute. We have our systems, those are our systems right there, compared to the commercial systems, these round tanks, to see which systems operated the most efficient. We were studying things like the growth rates from the different systems. So a 2-year study, and actually our system here outperformed. Those are grow beds over on the right that correspond with each one of the fish tanks. And we used a little hybrid system on our system. But the other thing that we have a big problem with is natural food for fish. We want to be able to feed those fish some natural things. So this is black soldier fly larva. I've been working with some researchers around the country to produce enough of this product to be able to feed the fish. So that's what they look like. They're in every state. Wherever there's waste, you'll find them. And you probably have seen them and didn't know what they were. They're 42% protein. So that's what we need. We need high protein food to be able to feed our fish. The other thing that we do is in the wintertime to be able to grow year round is we mix our wood chip with brewery waste, and we get temperatures of 150, 160 degrees on the exterior of our hoop houses to be able to keep them warm and be able to grow throughout the winter. Because it just doesn't make sense to, with our short growing season, to be able to eat sustainable food for that short period of time. So we've been able to do this and put compost in the 4 corners. The brewery waste and the wood chip to get it up to 160 degrees, and then those crops can survive throughout the winter. That's my grandson. These are little dated pictures. He's now 11 years old. So when it gets 25 degrees or colder, we cover those beds with plastic over the night, and then the crops survive. One of the key crops that we're growing, and we have been growing, is kale. Very intensive, and the reason that we're able to do that intensive production is because of the soil, because of the fertility of the soil. This is our Jackson farm where we grew carrots. We grew 700,000 pounds of carrots slated for schools. One of the things I'll talk about a little bit is how we get food into our schools, because one of the groups was talking about, the co-op group was talking about forming the co-op and having customers and giving more money back to the farmer instead of the middleman. So this is a way that you can do it. So this is in Jackson. Another thing that we do is water catchment. These old greenhouses built in the late 1920s, they're gutter connected, the water comes off the roof. So instead of that water going out into the asphalt of the garden or into the sewers, we capture 30,000 gallons of water. And we use that water to grow our food inside the greenhouses. And we also have animals on the farm. We have goats. This was our first goat. He was actually in Money magazine many years ago, sitting on my lap, and he wound up being this humongous, nasty male goat that smelled very bad. His name was Oakley. He was the father of all of these goats you're about to see. Alpine goats that we use for milking. And we also have about 600 chickens on the farm that lay eggs, and of course bees. And one of the problems we have with our bees across the country and across the world today is that we're losing our bees to, I think, a combination of things. They're trying to pinpoint what is killing all the bees. And I think it has to do with pesticides. I think it has to do with some mites. I think it has to do with other bees invading the hives from different places around the world. But that's something we teach folks at our workshops of how to keep bees. Now this is our, because we had farms in Madison, Chicago. This is the front doorstep of Chicago, Grant Park. This is a 2-acre farm. Farms can be very aesthetically pleasing, and that's what they should be. They shouldn't be like these weedy patches, you can't identify things. So this is an example of hauling thousands of pounds of compost from Wisconsin into Grant Park and producing this garden. A lot of people will walk through there and they have a hard time identifying that this is actually a vegetable garden. One of the other things in 2015, some of those carrots, 30,000 pounds, went into Chicago public schools for one-day consumption. They have 500,000 students. They use 30,000 pounds of carrots for one day. So we went down to Chicago. We brought in the carrots. I ate lunch with about 3 classes. And you can see on this tray, this is what they use, this tray with dividers in it. And on that tray, you'll see some processed bread. You'll see some corn from a 10-pound can. You'll see some nuggets, some little round chicken nuggets, and some other kind of cake in a plastic bag. The only 2 things on that tray that's worth eating would be the carrots that are raw, coined, and the milk. I don't know if it came from Wisconsin, but you know, at least the milk is something we could say would be worth eating. The other thing that we do is go on the road. And this is in Minnesota Women's Environmental Institute, which is a farm I've been working in helping develop over the last 10 years. And of course, it all starts with growing soil. So this is a compost class where everybody's participating. Layers of carbon and nitrogen. To grow good compost, you have to have 1 part carbon, 1 part nitrogen. And folks really get into this. They get smelly and dirty, but by the end of the day, they're very satisfied because they can take those skills back to their farms and grow soil. And this is a new crop that I think can be a savior for Wisconsin farmers. I was waiting for one of the student groups to bring that up, but they didn't. This is hemp. Now, back in the day, Wisconsin was one of the leading hemp growing states before Prohibition for hemp. And now we're back in the game. And like I said, in 2018, 400 farmers signed up. This year, 2,100 are going to be growing hemp. And it's going to start in the next few weeks because it's very susceptible to cold. So farmers will be planting that. There are some issues around growing that because we have a lot of farrow hemp. And the female plant is king and queen and everything. It's all about the female plant. So that's something that farmers have to learn how to grow this in the proper way. I grow it indoors. That's what's considered a bud, and that's where most of the energy comes from, the buds. But the product that we produce is a full spectrum product made from the buds, the leaves, I teach a class at Milwaukee School of Engineering, and my students there are turning the main stem into hempcrete, which has a better R value than actual concrete. So a lot of homes in the future will be built with hempcrete. The actual stem on those plants are harder than any hardwood that's out there. So it's an amazing plant that can produce over 100 different products, maybe 1,000 different products as we move along the continuum. So this is our crop this year, and those are the mushrooms that we're growing this year. And one of the things we discovered that hemp grows faster, 2 times as fast in water than it does on land. So what we do is we take these pots and we put them in our aquaponic systems, and they grow twice as fast. So one of the things that the city of Milwaukee has approached me about is to take some of these buildings. Sorry about that. I have to turn I never get any calls. Is to take these old buildings, and I have a group of students that are designing a aquaponic system indoors of 50,000 square foot, 100,000, 200,000 square foot aquaponic system to be able to grow not only hemp but vegetables inside a lot of these old buildings that we have in Milwaukee. In the future is vertical farms. There are some cities around the world, because this issue around food is everywhere. It's not only in rural communities, it's in all over the world. It's to be able to build these vertical farms. So this is a design that I designed a few years ago. It's about a $12 million project. On the bottom floor would be a grocery store and a food desert community, and then you would have the growing inside the building. You would be off the grid. You'd have classrooms, meeting rooms, commercial kitchens to teach. Somebody brought up, what was the group that was talking about cooking? Absolutely essential thing. Most people don't know how to cook anymore. We've lost the art of cooking. So that's going to be a really important thing, and I hope you guys follow through and make that happen in your community here with the university. So thank you very much. I'd like to open it up for questions now. By the way, that PowerPoint used to be 1,087 slides. I cut it back a little bit today because I know you guys had your contest, and that's really important. But I'd like to answer any questions you might have. Yes.
How do you, or I don't know if your farm deals with it, but there is a,
I'm coming with the mic.
I'm using my teacher voice. How do you incentivize people to become farmers? From what I've gathered, there's sort of a dearth of farmers in Wisconsin in general. People who are taking it up as a vocation.
Not true.
Is that right?
Not true. We have to come up with a reason for young people, because we need young people to get involved in agriculture here in the state, because many young people leave the farms and go to ag school, and they never go back to their family farm. They go to these big operations. So what we need to do, like I said, we lost 780 farms in the state last year. We're going to have to show that you can make a living, because most young people I talk to and I've worked with, they stay in the business about 5 years. They graduate from college and they tell me, I want to farm, I want to do what you do. So they go out and they'll go into a city and they'll do some urban agriculture and so forth, and 5 years later they're ready to jump ship. And the reason that they're ready to jump ship, they're making $20,000, if you can imagine, they're making $20,000 a year. Their peers are making 6 figures that they graduated with. They want to start a family. You can't start a family when you're making $20,000 a year. So we have to come up with an economic reason for them to stay into farming. And we have big opportunity, like I said, with hemp as a cash crop, with being able to grow it inside cities, inside buildings, because most young people are moving into our cities. They want to live in cities where the action is. They don't want to live out in rural communities, unfortunately. But that's the reality of what we're dealing with. Yes, our president.
So a lot of what you're describing here seems to be ways to take advantage of opportunities within underutilized parts of the current economy and region in which you're working. I noticed, however, that the video before you start speaking ended with a person quoting the Communist Manifesto, right? Do you think it's possible to have kind of scalable, sustainable agriculture that makes people's lives better in this way with the current economic system and economic order, or was that a sort of an intentional kind of comment about the limits of capitalism as a way that can help us have a sustainable food society or food?
Well, I think what we have to do is, I think it can be a reality. I think what we have to do is do a lot of joint venture projects. For example, my farm, I work with others. Instead of me having this vertical kind of thing, maybe I do two things. Maybe I grow, and maybe I market my product. But a very important piece is the processing piece. To be able to process it into products that are sustainable, that can go into the marketplace. The other piece that we have to do is direct marketing from the farm to the schools. The schools use tremendous amount of food. We need to be able to take out that middle person. I was this past weekend I was with Alice Waters. I don't know if you guys know who she is. Shay Panisse and Ron Finley from LA, and we were in Milwaukee, and we did a talk together, a panel together. And one of her things, she has an edible schoolyard in California where they grow food at the school, and then they take it to the kitchen because she's a chef and has trained many of the top chefs you see on TV today. But she took out the one piece. The one piece would be for students to actually grow the food at her edible schoolyard. So what they do is they prep the food and they cook the food, and the food goes into the cafeteria because it's just not feasible for the students to do everything. So there are many ways that we can skin the cat on this thing. And I just believe we have to work together. Many of the farmers have always worked in silos, and they do their own thing instead of coming together. Even though we always talk about rural communities, but times are different than the old days. I remember when a handshake meant a handshake, but today you got to have a contract. Otherwise you get burned really bad. So we need to start doing that again, working together. This co-op idea is a way, food hubs are a way, but we have to take out the big guys out of the gate. And the only way to do that is to direct. CSAs are great, but we have to do more than just CSAs. We need to do those food hubs and those co-ops, and we have to engage. And it has to be something from the schools. The schools have to participate. Imagine if the school systems had somebody in the office that would be calling the farmers to find out what the farmers had that was available. We don't have that. We got to have that, because otherwise food will never move from the farm into those schools. So that's something we're working on right now. We're trying to push that idea.
So like with your projects, like where do you mainly get like funding from, like as you started off? And like I know that I can see that most of the like infrastructures are not as expensive, but there are like things like solar panels and like how do you fund as you progress?
Yeah, that's a great question because I believe in I really believe in entrepreneurial, to be an entrepreneur. This is not something that nonprofits should be doing. We did it because I wanted to prove that it could be done, but it's not sustainable. I'll tell you, it's not sustainable because we have a $5 million budget. Every year I got to go out and beat the bushes for $5 million to do all this training and everything. That's not sustainable. And I believe that you have to have some skin in the game. If you don't have any skin in the game, you're not going to stay in the game. So I think this is, nonprofits are great for training folks, but they're not really great for a model that shows that you can really make a living doing this. So we need to have people like you and others that are interested in this, but you have to put some skin in the game, you have to, some sweat equity, you have to put some of your own capital, you have to go out and find funders that will fund your projects for them to be sustainable. Anybody else? Yes.
I was wondering if you had some pests that are more nasty inside of these facilities than they might be outside that create some challenges and how you deal with those challenges.
Well, you definitely have less pests inside than you do outdoors. We're going to have less pests this year because we had an extremely cold winter. So there won't be as many pests this year outside. But you do have pests inside. We use ladybugs. I just bought 10,000 ladybugs and dispersed them throughout the greenhouses, and they ate the aphids and some of the other bugs. But you have to battle, whether you're inside or outside, you're going to have to deal with pests in a sustainable way. So that's what we do. And if you have a strong plant, it's just like our bodies. If you have a strong body, you can withstand disease better than somebody that has a compromised immune system. So a plant is the same. Plants are just like we are, really. I mean, they really are just like we are in terms of being able to sustain themselves if they're grown in healthy soil. If they're grown in bad soil, those plants will not survive. They'll be susceptible to insects, whereas a strong plant can ward off insects. Yes?
I wanted to ask something about the question of funding that relates to the comrades' question over here, and also a project that I'm working on in the town that I live in Southern Illinois, and we've been very inspired by your work for the last few decades. One of the things so we're trying to do an urban agriculture project along with many other things, but one of the things that we run into is the problem is if you rely on grant funding, then every year, every 2 years, you're scrambling to rewrite grants, and then that ends up sucking up all of your energy. But then if you rely on kind of private investor funding, then, who knows at what point do they start saying, well, you've got to start increasing production, you have to start sacrificing the quality of what you're doing, and it's a very inefficient way at getting the healthy food to the people that don't already have access to it, right? Because you have a market barrier to their access. So what we're trying to do is come up with a pitch for municipal funding of this. Like right now, the city that I'm in, I'm sure the city of Ripon, right, spends money on public parks, spends money on things that are widely recognized to be public services. And what you've done and what you've demonstrated is that this is a tremendous public service. And it's also something that's even a public safety question, because you're talking about getting access to healthy food, which has all of these side effects here. Right. So I'm wondering, have you ever tried that in Milwaukee? And by the way, where I'm from, what we're arguing is we should cut the police budget in half and fund urban food system as well as other things.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at the example, and you've probably heard about this example in Cuba, what happened to the Cubans. What happened in Cuba was that when the Russians pulled out, they left all of these the infrastructure of, when they started building buildings and so forth, and the government got involved in terms of creating a sustainable agricultural system that's the #1 sustainable agricultural system in the world today. But the government got behind, and I think that cities like Ripon and Milwaukee and other cities have to put some money into the food systems, because that's the only way. And I think some of the students were talking a little bit about that. To be able to make this thing sustainable, because you're right, it's a risk. If you take money, if you're a for-profit and you take money from investors, there's always that risk. What we try to look for is socially responsible investors, but you never know if they're going to change, whether you can trust those so-called social responsible investors. But what happened in Cuba, it increased the life expectancy of every citizen in Cuba. When you look at our hemisphere, we have Canada as the longest life expectancy. The next country is Cuba, and we're number 3. How did we become number 3 when Cuba wasn't even on? I mean, they were so low back in the day when the Russians were in control of their lives and so forth. So, and when you go to a hospital, when you go to schools and you see so many sick people, unfortunately, I was in the hospital this year, and it's really a shame to see people come in there with limbs missing and from diabetes, and mostly people of color and poor people from rural communities coming into hospitals like St. Luke's and Frederick. It's really, just not right. And we can fix that. Part of our problem is we eat bad food. And we don't have the education. It doesn't start at the grade school. So part of what we're trying to do, and I know Alice Waters is trying to do this, and she's been working on this and very passionate about working with young kids and getting them to understand the food. We used to, in our state, you had to go through these stages of learning about your food system, but they took it out of the curriculum. Or maybe it's still in the curriculum, but they don't teach it anymore. So there should be a garden in every school. There's no excuse not to have a garden, because I demonstrated you can grow it on asphalt or concrete. And even the schools that have asphalt and concrete playgrounds, shorten some of those playgrounds and grow food. Make that a part of our curriculum. So those are the kinds of things, and it's not easy work. This is really passionate, hard work that you have to do. So thanks for asking that question of how are you going to fund it, because it is hard if you're a nonprofit to come up with that money every year, to go out, take you away from what you're supposed to be doing, and you're chasing money all the time. So our cities need to step up. So, and I'm glad that some of the students talked about that today, getting the city, getting the colleges involved in funding. So, and I was on a college campus just yesterday that had 150 acres of land, Eastern Washington University. And they have this little skinny, sustainable garden. I mean, it was ridiculous. And I told them about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a really wonderful talk, and it fit in well with the day. I want to, before we announce the winners here, I'll note one thing. Our very first presentation in this room this morning on plastics and carbon, the proposed innovation of those students was that local communities in Wisconsin should grow hemp to produce their local plastic to reduce the carbon footprint. Right? And so we're ending the day with the recommendation that in Wisconsin we should grow hemp to create lots and lots of products. So what we learned from the first Catalyst Day, grow hemp. Right? I think some people would be upset about that from maybe 50 years ago here at Ripon College. Couldn't have said that here in 1970. Okay, the winners of the hackathon. And this is our last bit before we're done for the day of Catalyst Day. Although don't forget at 7 o'clock tonight is the awards convocation. the second place winning team, CCC, Combating the Cold, Connecting the Community, Creating Careers. Come on up. Let me shake everybody's hands. We can get pictures here, right? See? You can go off that way. There you go. Yeah, just follow across. There you go. Right? Remember, we're streaming this, right? It's hard to raise money. We're a non-profit. We spend all of our time trying to raise money to pay the gap between tuition and what we actually spend to educate you. See? So we need pictures and we need impressive things, right? Thank you for that point as well. All right. First place. Food for thought, washing away retention issues in schools. Come on up. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope you enjoyed the day. We sure did. Go to dinner.